Matthew Geller, what's your outlook for biotech in 2012?
I think it's going to be a good year. I don't think it's going to be a great year. And my one concern really is that people expect someday that the great years of the 2000s and the 1990s will come back. I don't think that's ever going to happen. You only have those bubbles once every 100 years or so. But I think it'll be a fairly good year. We're seeing some new emerging companies doing well. We're seeing some companies with really strong data now. Companies like Celgene, although they had a little bit of a setback this week. Companies like Onyx with carfilzomib. We're having some great developments in targeted therapy. And I think that that's the real theme going forward, really great targeted therapy. People are really moving in on treatments for cancer, for autoimmune diseases that are very specific, that really are effective, but don't have the kind of side effects that one used to see in very broad-acting drugs like the chemotherapy agents.
Looking back to 2011, we didn't have a lot of mergers because the prior year we had a lot of large pharmaceuticals buy out smaller biotechs. Didn't have it in 2011, but we have it in 2012.
I think we will see some major acquisitions in 2012. One thing that I've found as a banker now is that it takes a long time for pharmaceutical companies to act. They are very nervous. I think there's a lot of incentive for business development people to not do things. Because if they're right, the positive effects aren't seen for years when they're probably gone. If they're wrong, their heads get cut off very quickly. So things take a long time. I think some of the prices are very attractive now. I think one of the trends we're really seeing that's really interesting right now is that the Japanese companies are doing quite well, and they realize that there's a lack of population growth in Japan. So what they're doing is looking very seriously at acquiring US companies so that they can have a market in the United States and also in Europe, doing European acquisitions as well as third world acquisitions. The other area which is very interesting is generic biologics. And that's an area, a lot of the VCs have moved into that very aggressively. I think there's been a much more open policy from the FDA for generic biologics. I think we're going to see a lot more of that and acquisitions in that area.
Finally, speaking of VCs, will we see a lot of IPOs in the early part of 2012?
I think we'll see some. We're seeing a very unusual kind of market right now. It's a very bipolar market, what I call a bipolar market, which means if you have companies that are very far advanced, that have successful phase 3 data, that are on the market, it is possible to do an IPO and not at an unreasonable valuation. There's often some kind of haircut. The earlier stage companies, it's much more difficult to get done. I think one of the more remarkable companies that's moved forward is a company like Clovis. What I call this is the jockey phenomenon. You have some companies now that have very successful CEOs. And if these CEOs have been successful in the past, they can put together new companies with not a lot of data, not a lot of advanced stage products, but people believe in these individuals like a Pat Mahaffey, and they're willing to put a lot of money out for them. So we'll see some of those IPOs too.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you very much.